to share this next video with you. Years ago, I had my own video production business. It was called Full Production Video. Did a lot of event videography. Perhaps one of the greatest opportunities I had was to interview a World War II veteran. This gentleman's name was Dick Falvey, or Richard Falvey, and he was part of the 101st Airborne, and he was part of the Normandy invasion on D-Day. And so it was the 60th anniversary of D-Day. It was coming up. I was pastoring a church in Watkins Glen, New York, and I met this gentleman, and I had the opportunity to interview him. It was one of the supreme joys of my life to meet this gentleman and to interview him, and then to put together a video. I mean, this guy is a gem. Well, not too long ago, I was preaching a message here at the current church that I pastor, and God brought this interview back to my remembrance, and I started thinking about him, and I put him into my message. And I used him as an illustration, and as I was doing so, when I came back to the office and I started to edit the video, I was thinking, I wonder if I could locate that interview and put it up on YouTube, because I think that many people will find this very interesting. Number one, the guy's a sweetheart. Number two, he's got such a great story to tell. Number three, I mean, not just at Normandy, but he was at Bastogne. I believe that was the Battle of the Bulge. I was able to get it into a usable format so I could post it on the internet, and I thought, wow, this really would be a blessing to a lot of people. A lot of people would probably find this very interesting. Anyway, I really hope you like it. It's in multiple parts here, so I probably won't do an introduction on each one of them, but I just want to say that's what it is. Don't miss the other parts. There'll be at least 3. There might be 4 parts, but they'll all be listed as We Remember. And it'll be the anniversary, the 60th anniversary of D-Day. I hope you enjoy it. Here it is.
No, as a young boy, I watched these fellows jump out of these airplanes at the end of this day of barnstorming where they'd take people up for a ride. And right then, the light was lit in me that someday I was going to jump from an airplane. And when World War II broke out, and I knew sooner or later I was going to be part of the service, and of course we had the draft back then. And in those days, you had to be 21 years old to enlist on your own. If you weren't 20, this was that particular time. They changed it down to 18. But I remember going to my mother and saying, I want you to, if you weren't 21, you had to get your parents' consent. And she said, you're going to go soon enough. Wait, just wait till you're drafted. Well, I was 21 in August, and then I went in by myself without my mother's consent, and I tried to join. Well, I went to a recruiting office in Yonkers, New York, and talked to the recruiter there and said I wanted to be a paratrooper and all. And I said, but I have a crooked left arm. My left arm is crooked. And he said, well, I don't think you'd ever get in. He said, can you use it? You know, and I said, yeah, of course, it's my strongest arm. I'm left-handed. So he said, well, you know, bring your arm up, which I did, and I can't touch my left shoulder. And he said, well, bring up your right hand, and I can reach it. He said, they would reject you. He said, the paratroopers want men with no imperfections. So I said, well, I'm not going to join. So a week later, I went to another recruiting office down in New York City and went through the same sort of program and explained that the arm was crooked, and but it didn't feel it impaired me any. And he asked me to, well, bring it up, and I brought it up to my shoulder, and he said, well, bring up the other arm, and I brought the other arm and stopped short. He said, you don't have any problems. So I was accepted right then and there to go into the airborne or become a paratrooper. But I had assumed that being a paratrooper back then, we're talking 1942. Now this is, you know, Neanderthal time. I thought that I'd be part of a small group of 8, 10, a dozen men or whatever, jump in, blow up a bridge, find some prisoners or capture somebody, and that would be it. Mission over, get back home again or get out. I never realized that it turned into a new form of infantry. That's exactly what it was. It's airborne infantry. They drop this in and fight your way out. Every little piece likes to think that they would different or separate or whatever. We never were part of anything, and all of a sudden we were assigned to the 101st Airborne Division, and we felt, well, they were lucky to have us, the 506. So, and every regiment was the 502 and the 501 were part of the 101st. But each has their own little category of, this is us. Don't make it lop us in with the whole 101st Division. We're different. We're separate. See, the 506 was the first parachute regiment ever to be formed from day one with men off the street. Normally, you had to have 13 weeks of combat infantry or infantry training. Then you could join, or say you'd like to become a paratrooper, and then you'd have to go through the airborne training. We had volunteered to be paratroopers when we entered, and that's where they sent us. In Toccoa, Georgia, where the 506 was formed, was the beginning of the first regiment that was ever formed from day one. And that was Currahee, and that's where the Band of Brothers all came together. And it was special. It was very, very special, because we had airborne training from day one. There was nothing that was out of about 2,000 men in the regiment. They had 5,000 men that had volunteered for the regiment, but there were washouts all the time. If you didn't live up to the standards, you were gone. Well, I was born and raised in Yonkers, New York, and had a wonderful mother and father. And I was born with a birthmark on my left cheek, and the boys used to tease me all the time about, looked like somebody had kissed me or somebody had hit me. And I'd go home sort of discouraged and probably whining and crying to my mother. And she'd say to me, "Son, you just look at them and look them straight in the eye and tell them that you have been kissed by angels." And as life has gone on, and I've lived all this great many years, there's no doubt in my mind that I have been kissed by angels. And that lived with me all my life. And another thing that my mother had implanted on me and all my friends before we went out to spend an evening, as boys would do, and back then I think it was a lot different than the way life is today, but she would point a finger at each one of us and say, "Dare to be a Daniel, dare to stand alone, and dare to have a purpose firm, and dare to make it known." And that has lived with me all my life. And when I finally joined into the armed forces at Camp Toccoa in Georgia, there was this mountain called Currahee that we eventually had to run, and it separated the men from the boys in many cases. And Currahee means standing alone, which brought me back to dare to be a Daniel. Our training with the 506 and with the 101st Airborne was, well, very extensive, intensive, and most of us that had been in the outfit from day one felt that we were pretty much overtrained. We were ready for combat. We felt no more training. Give us the real thing, because we're just tired of doing these things that the Army repeated over and over again. And, well, they finally put us in an area that was full of barbed wire fences and military police. And we knew this was the beginning or the preparation for the D-Day invasion. And any man that went near the fence was immediately told to get away. And if he tried to get over the fence, they were told to shoot them. And they briefed us on exactly what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. It all sounded so wonderful. We looked at sandboxes and the explanation of how it would all work. How would we would assemble. Well, after approximately 1 week in the area that we were secured at, there was one afternoon they said, "Well, this looks like it," and we started to prepare to get ready, and then the word came down, "We're not going today." And we knew that was to be the day, because they had fed us steak and ice cream, and that was the first time in over a year any of us had steak or ice cream. And well, the next day we felt that the weather had gotten better, and we would go, and we finally did load into the planes, and it was a double British summertime, and it was almost daylight until 11:30 at night. And it was late that night that we were loading into the planes. And as I remember correctly, it was about close to 11:30, a little bit after 11, that we got into the planes and finally took off. And it was an enormous armada of airplanes. It's hard to explain, or people don't understand it, that when they finally regrouped, once we were in the air, there was a group of 3, 3, and 3 in a V position, 9 planes across, and when they finally put it in the formation that they needed, it extended for 300 miles. It's almost unbelievable, the enormity of this and the logistics of putting it all together. I've learned all this later on. I mean, I was just a little individual that night that climbed into a plane and said, well, this is it, dear Lord, take care of me. And it was a moonlit night, and I was in that plane. There was a Captain Hester, myself, and a fellow that was my best friend, Otto Sykes. And not one of us can remember anybody else that was in that airplane. To this day, we can't find anybody that acknowledges that they were in that airplane. And we flew out across the channel, and the idea was Cherbourg Peninsula sticks out like a thumb. And we came out of England and came around onto the far side of the Cherbourg Peninsula, went between 2 islands out there, and there was a ship there that was projecting a light up to let people know they were on the right course. And as soon as we hit land, red light went on. We were to get up, stand up, and hook up and get ready. And I remember saying to the captain, wow, what a surprise. Here we're over enemy territory, and everything is so quiet. We're really going to fool them. Now, flying from one side of the peninsula to the other side would be, and this I've learned recently, was only a 12-minute flight. And we were about 3 minutes into that flight over the land when all hell broke loose. It was unbelievable. And the planes got into some sort of a low cloud cover, and they were dodging up and down. There was flak coming up. It was I can remember, it was a horrible experience to see what was happening, and it was no longer a surprise. The trace of bullets that were coming up, it almost looked like a Christmas tree with all these lights and that were coming up from the ground, and explosions in all directions. And I can remember we were standing there, and I was right at the door, right behind the captain, and I actually witnessed 2 airplanes blow up into a ball of fire. And I said, dear Lord, let me out of this airplane, at least give me a fighting chance. And I can remember that just as clear as, as though it was happening right now. Just let me out. And without, the plane never slowed down. And normally in most jumps, the plane will slow down to close to 100 miles an hour. And then you drop out and it's not too bad. But they never slowed down that night. And they had they pretty much had gotten out of formation. And I wouldn't be surprised if I was as close to 500 feet from the ground when I went out. And I checked my chute and, could see all this fire going up in all directions. And before I knew it, I hit the ground. And I was in an apple orchard. And I was still trying to get out of my parachute when my best buddy Otto, that jumped right behind me, he had gotten out of his chute prior to me and found me, and we had landed probably within 50 feet of one another. And out of our battalion, there was, there were 4 companies: Headquarters Company, D, E, and F Company. And we were supposedly to land on one big field in Normandy. And each company would have a light of a different color. And you would assemble on the light for your particular company. And if there was any firing or any enemy activity, D Company was to take care of any of the enemy activity. The rest of us were to assemble and move out for the causeways or to the Utah beach. And our mission was to secure, there were causeways that ran for probably more than a mile from the main road down to the beach. And they were sort of earth embankments through marshy areas. And, if they had been cut off, then the men coming in on the beach wouldn't be able to get up on the main highways. And that was our basic mission, was to get to those causeways and secure them right down to the beach, so that the men coming in at 6:30 in the morning would have no trouble. We landed in Normandy that night at 1:30 in the morning, scattered all over the Normandy Peninsula. It was the Cherbourg Peninsula. It was chaotic, and I've always told people, I honestly felt that the invasion was a success because the dropping of us turned out to be a failure. We were scattered in so many areas, and I felt that it confused the Germans more than if we were all in one concentrated area, because men were turning up for miles and miles around in all directions, and they honestly didn't feel this was the real thing because it was such small groups that were giving so much grief. Well, these here, this is one of them. This is a boot that jumped into Normandy in 1944. I brought them home, and my mother took good care of them. She put shoe trees in them, and I never did wear them. And when the opportunity came in 1994 to jump again on the 50th anniversary, I wore the same boots. I took them to a shoemaker and had him look them over. And I said, don't alter them, but make sure they're not going to fall apart. And shine them up for me. And they did jump in Normandy a second time in 1994. And I said I knew there'd be one more jump in them. And I had them bronzed. And now I find that I'm going to jump in Normandy in 2004. And I had to buy a brand new pair of boots. These would have, if I hadn't had them bronzed, I could have used them again. But they're sort of proud of them, and I've had both of them a plaque put on the bottom of them that was my name and the outfit that I was in. And my children will inherit them one way or another. I don't know whether they'll end up in one family or in two families, but they would make good bookends or something of that sort. But a piece of memorabilia that somebody, I'm hoping, will think of the old man that brought them home. See, all our equipment on D-Day was impregnated against gas, and even these boots had been rubbed down with sort of a greasy substance. Not too greasy, but it was of some sort that was to impregnate them in case we had a gas attack. And my outer garment, my jumpsuit and all, that was impregnated against gas in case we ran into a gas attack. And at one time, the word went out, make sure you have your gas mask. They think there's gas in the area, but it never materialized. We never did run into gas. This here was what I came home with in 1940, when did I come home? 45. This was my original Eisenhower jacket and pants, not pants, but shirt. And this is a jumpsuit that I bought for the jump in 1994. But I never had all this fruit salad and one is the Belgian Croix de Guerre and the other is the French Croix de Guerre. And this is the orange lanyard from Holland or the Netherlands. And they told us for this trip that we're making, put all your fruit salad on there so people will know that you had been here before. So I'm sort of proud of that. And this is a replica of the uniform of the original paratroop uniform. Now that's another long story, but after D-Day, they wanted to make all the military have the same uniform, and we were no longer allowed to use our jumpsuits except in our own private affairs within the regiment or within the division. And the jumpsuit was something that was pretty much not part of regular military wear.